Hey, welcome to the lesson. In this one, I'm going to try to bridge together the two last concepts I was talking about in this series I've been doing. So, 2 lessons ago, I was talking about chordal ambiguity, just trying to see multiple chords inside of whatever given chord you're playing over, so we have more options available. And then in another lesson, I was talking about being able to play our scales and our chords in different ways, being able to play the same thing, but maybe in a different position, using a different starting finger, and so on. So in the intro to this video, I just did like a little jam track that just goes E7 to A, and then there's a little tease of a D chord in there. So actually, I'll show you how that goes. It just was like an E7, down here, and then an A, and then I threw in a D, first inversion, and then back to A, just as something to kind of get to lay a foundation so we can try these ideas. So throughout the improv that I did in the intro, I was going between a couple different main areas and different chords and so on. So one of the first things I was touching on was like an E major pentatonic thing. So if we can combine our pentatonic scales with our modal awareness and then some of this chordal ambiguity business I was talking about, we can get some really fun, kind of adventurous jam stuff going on. So our E major pentatonic is the same as our C sharp minor pentatonic positioning, which is up on 9th fret of low E. If you want to play it in that position, you definitely don't have to do it that way, but that's a really common way to do it. So I was just touching on that, doing little almost Allman Brother like licks in there. Now, what I did like toward the beginning of the jam to add a little tension and to kind of lead up to the A chord, because we're starting on E and then going to A, is that then I threw in an arpeggio for a C sharp dominant chord, and I made it a flat 9 like that. So in the same area that you can do your C sharp minor pentatonic, then you can throw in a dominant, and that leads really well into an A, because this will require a little explanation here. C sharp dominant, especially I find like a flat 9 sound, leads really well into an F sharp minor chord, which is a relative minor of A, and that's where we're heading. So what I'm trying to do is think of a way to sort of tonicize the next chord I'm going to, if that makes sense. So I'm playing an E to start out, but then I tease the dominant of the relative minor of the chord I'm going to. So it's a bit of layered thinking, again tying into that chordal ambiguity thing. Even if you're not necessarily thinking of 2 chords at once all the time, if you just slip that in every once in a while, you can get some different colors. So again, I start with E major pentatonic, but kind of more, I'm more thinking of it as C sharp minor pentatonic, because C sharp minor is the relative minor of E. So starting out in this area up here on the 9th fret, and you can work your way up like that and do some of that stuff. And then again, I just threw in right before the A chord, C sharp dominant kind of arpeggio with a D natural, which is the flat 9, and it leads me into an A when we go to the A chord. And then you can then from there, well, what I did was then I switched gears. So over the A chord, then I was really switching from thinking of the key of A, which I was doing at first, and then I'm switching to thinking of my A as a dominant chord as well. So therefore, the A is the 5th of D, and so then I'm switching to D, and you can get E Dorian then, because E is the 2nd degree of D, which makes it Dorian. So it's a minor chord with a major 6, basically. The major 6 of that E minor chord, if you think of it like this, like if you do like a bar chord for your E minor and put a C sharp in there, that's kind of, those are some of the notes I'm thinking of hitting. Now keep in mind, I'm doing that over the A. So over the A, I'm thinking of E minor, I'm thinking of E Dorian. And then over the E, I'm thinking of the key of A and throwing in C sharp dominant sometimes to create tension to go to the A. So it's almost like you're never really in the key of the chord you're playing. You're always kind of, it's always this back and forth and kind of tension release that music really, I think that's kind of what it's all about. So, so again, as a recap, I had E major pentatonic, C sharp dominant to lead into, I'm thinking of my A chord as like an F sharp minor, but it's really the same. Like if I change the root note of that chord, it goes from F sharp minor 7 to A major, just like that. But then the next step was when I go to the A, then I'm switching gears and thinking of the key of D, so that my A is dominant, and I can play an E. Well, you can play really anything in the key of D will be really cool there. But I was mostly doing these little licks where I switch from E major pentatonic to E minor pentatonic, but throwing in the major 6, which is a C sharp, which is the major third of A. And it really works well to my ear. It's all subjective anyway. You could hear this and think it sounds awful, and that's cool. It's all good. It's all about finding your own musical voice and your preferences and stuff. And sometimes breaking out of your preference is cool too. So yeah, when I go to the A chord, I'm thinking E minor pentatonic. But then here's where that the last week's lesson I did was on being able to play the same thing in different ways. So then if I'm playing over the A chord and thinking of the key of D, that means that my G arpeggio that I could throw in is Lydian. Lydian is just, I think of it as a major chord with a sharp 4. So then what I do there is then throw in some of this kind of stuff. So here's my G major. If I just play it, now normally I wouldn't play it with ring finger, middle finger, and pointer like that, but I know I'm going to need my pinky to do the sharp 4. So it's just a really cool sound, kind of, it's ice vibe, you know, it reminds me of that. And I'm going to tab a lot of this stuff out. I'll try to tab out some of the ideas I did in the intro so you guys can kind of see exactly what I'm thinking. And then from there, you can take what you like and leave what you don't and maybe have some new stuff to play around with. But over the A chord, I'm throwing in a G Lydian kind of vibe. Now, I've said before, the way I think of a dominant chord, like in this case, A7, is I think of the Locrian is the inversion of that. So if I play an A9 chord, which is an A major chord with a flat 7, and the ninth, the major 2, you know, put on top, which is the ninth, that to me is the same as a C sharp half diminished, which you could play here, like that. So I'm up on 16 of A, and just going across like that, 16, 14, 12, and then you can do the same kind of pattern here. And that just creates a whole different kind of sound, and then you switch right back to your E7, and you've got a nice cohesive idea. So without even the backing track, I'll try to do this without anything that I'm playing to, and maybe you can kind of hear what's happening anyway. So over the E, C sharp, A, and then Dorian for E, and then I go back to a dominant kind of run to make it E again. That's it in a nutshell, and then I just have many different ways I know to do the same kind of thing, and that ties back into the lesson from last week. Being able to play an A7 so that it feels like a G Lydian. It's just D major, really. And then back to E. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to do one more recap of how I'm thinking of that. We have an E7 chord to an A, ultimately turning that into a 7th chord too. So we're thinking of the key of A, or I'm thinking of the key of A over the E7, throwing in a C sharp dominant, in this case flat 9 arpeggio. Whoop. To our A, then I'm treating A as dominant, which means we can do G Lydian, and that sounds really cool over an A. C sharp half diminished is really cool because it pretty much is it's an A9 chord without the root. And then you can tie that right back into like an E7 to lead you back to where you were in the beginning. So I hope that just gets the wheels turning a little bit on the possibilities you can have with this stuff. Again, I'll tab out some ideas, put a link in the description. And if you have any questions, if you're like, I don't know what is going on or what this means, like I always say, hit me up. Let me know if you have any specific questions or need extra help. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much.